The owners of a biscuit factory are getting murdered. Well, I guess that's how the cookie crumbles. We're talking Danish crime shows
Cookie recipes.
and how babies are born on TV on this episode of
Welcome to Midsomer.
Thanks. I think it's showtime.
Hello, and welcome to Midsomer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show, Midsomer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Eileen Becker. Hi, Eileen.
Hey, Eric. Today we are talking about the Killings of Copenhagen, the fifth and final episode of the 16th series. It originally aired February 12th, 2014, and was directed by Alex Pillay and written by Paul Logue. Let's take a bite out of it.
Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer. So if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We will still be here when you get back. Extra spoiler warning, there will be Danish names in here that we will not be able to pronounce correctly. It is not for lack of trying. We apologize if we do get it wrong.
Right, and mobile charge?
Check.
Backup mobile?
Check.
You're sure?
Mobile charge, backup charge, landline working, and bat signal primed.
This is serious. You're a week from your due date. You could go at any minute.
If I feel even so much as a twinge, I will call you, I promise. Now please go.
Businessman Eric Calder arrives at a fancy hotel in Copenhagen, where a package is waiting for him. He opens the package, finding a Calder's Biscuits cookie tin. However, immediately after touching it, Calder begins choking, ultimately dying on the bathroom floor. And since this death occurs in Denmark and not Midsomer, the show is over. No, wait. Two Danish detectives, VPK Birgitte Paulsen and K. Anna Dane, investigate the death and discover that the cookie tin was coated in strychnine, and it was manufactured in a little town called Badger's Drift. So I guess it's back to Midsomer after all. We cut to the Barnaby household as a very pregnant Sarah is putting together an IKEA crib by herself while John is on the phone with the Danish detectives discussing Calder's murder. As DS Charlie Nelson arrives and is immediately put to work trying to decipher IKEA directions, Barnaby offers to interview the Calder family. Of course, this will conflict with John prepping for Sarah's delivery date in a week. But hey, I'm sure she absolutely won't give birth at the absolute worst possible time during the episode. The detectives head off to the Calder estate, where they meet wife Penelope and younger brother Julian, who seem a little too cozy together. After informing them about his death, they tell them that Eric was in Copenhagen to do a deal with the Toft Biscuit Company. Calder's Biscuits is a successful brand that helped put Badger's Drift on the map, as did all the murders that happened there. Eric's son Harry isn't at home, so they find him at Mrs. Trout's tea room, chatting up pretty hostess Summer Halston. The detectives inform him of his father's death, and he tells them he wasn't that close to his dad because he didn't want to be a cookie man. When Harry returns home later that night, he finds his mother and uncle fooling around. Next up is the factory, where we meet Clara Trout, factory manager and owner of the tea room, although it was really her deceased mother's place. She introduces them to Armand Stone, the baking genius / weirdo who created Golden Clusters, Calder's biggest selling cookie. Stone has a degree in chemistry and had arguments with Eric about who should run the factory, but denies that he synthesized the strychnine. Barnaby discovers the poison tin came from the factory, which makes it his case, so he shuts the whole factory down just as they were prepping that first delivery to Toft. He also learns that Eric and Harry had a big fight before the trip. Meanwhile, we cut to the Bradley brothers, local antiques dealers who don't seem to be doing that hot financially. Atticus is a little excited by the death of Eric Calder, thinking this is an opportunity to get some antiques from the estate. Meanwhile, Ernest is hiding something in the half-opened box under his desk. Great hiding spot, Ernie. Eric Calder apparently prepaid for the satin service for his funeral. John looks through the grief tributes and finds a card in Danish that reads forever. At the wake, Stone acts the egomaniac and the brothers make a small play for the antiques. Penelope announces that Julian will take over the company, which causes Stone to storm off. Ernest approaches Julian, telling him he has something worth his while. Harry attempts to kiss Summer, who brushes him off because she clearly could not tell that he was interested in her. Penelope attempts to kiss Julian, who brushes her off as well because clearly he has what he wanted all along, control of the company. He takes a call and heads to the factory late at night. He hears a noise and is knocked out. When he is missing the next day, the detectives find what looks like a kidnapping scene at the factory, where someone was tied up and had malt whiskey forced down their throat. Atticus finds the oh-so-cleverly hidden box and looks inside. It shocks him. At the tea room, Trout tells Summer to do a better job. Summer then finds a hungover Harry hiding by the dumpster. The police bring him in and tell him that they know he called Julian before his disappearance. Harry admits he called to tell him he knew about the affair, but he also knew his dad was leaving his mom. However, Julian received another call after Harry, and they still can't find his body. Back in Denmark at the Toft warehouse, they finally get their first delivery from Calder's Biscuits. Delivery comes with a little something extra as Julian's body has been shrink-wrapped to one of the pallets. Quick, someone call customer service.
That's such a bizarre scene.
It is. So, tourist information.
Yeah. Guess what? We're back in Badger's Drift. We kind of chose these episodes kind of randomly.
We used a random number generator to pick these episodes.
And we still had 3 in Badger's Drift. Why does anybody still live there? Also, this has to be an extremely wealthy village, as there are at least 3 very, very large manor houses surrounding the village. And what seemed a relatively small, simple village in that first episode, with a nice wood nearby, with a little flower that's rare, has also hosted a major music festival and has been producing famous British biscuits for over a century. It also has an astronomical murder rate, as we know. But this is the last time we will see it, as everyone is either dead or in prison.
You would think that if Calder's Biscuits is what put Badger's Drift on the map, we would have at least met one other employee of Calder's Biscuits in any of these previous episodes.
Yeah, you'd think somebody would say, yeah, I may work in the tea room during the day, but I'm third shift at Calder's Biscuits at night, and they have great benefits.
I think the one of the key points to understanding this episode, it was the 100th episode of Midsomer. And they decided to do this as a tribute to the very popular Danish dramas and crime shows that were really big hits on British television at the time. So, like the actresses that we're going to talk about in a minute, they were very recognizable to a large percentage of the British TV audience. And funny enough, Midsomer Murders is also a big hit in Denmark, but there it's called Barnaby.
Well, I think there's an interesting difference between the Danish setting and Midsomer, obviously. You've got the contrast between the big city of Copenhagen. Everything is very modern there. Everything is clean and flat, as Nelson says. And Badger's Drift, the factory, feels, as we'll discuss a little later, it feels very old-fashioned. The town is, as we have seen, it's very quaint and very British in its own way. But so you get this whole dichotomy between the two settings.
Well, I mean, I think part of it is like when as we talk in the second half, they do go to Copenhagen, and you go to that police station, which is huge and big and modern with all the glass windows. And I think of all the few times that we're ever in sort of the small boxy Midsomer Colston, whatever it is, police station. Also, like when they're like that scene where they're at the lake house in the second half, where it's it's flat and wide open. And when you're in Midsomer, it's woodsy and hilly. Yeah. And, you don't see a lot of water or lakes in Midsomer. When you do, someone's being murdered.
Yeah. It's very much the difference between Danish modern and British chintz,
Yeah. I will say is I really thought that they were going to play up a little, like I thought they were going to do a little bit more fish out of water comedy. Like they did a little bit with Nelson, sort of his weirdo Danish compliments and things of that nature. But I also was like, no, Barnaby is still like the kick-ass detective in Denmark as he is in Midsomer. I just thought it would have been a little funny if like he hadn't known what to do right off the bat, and Paulson was like, "Oh my God."
He does eventually impress her. I love the fact that it's 2 women and 2 men, because it does bring up the Danish, even with their bright, airy police station, with the 2 female detectives, they are also more forward thinking on that issue. Whereas Coston, you do occasionally see some female police and female detectives, but they seem secondary. They're stuck in a rut. We do have a medical examiner. The coroner is female with this one, but and we do get another one, a couple more. But it's still very much a man's directed show with the Barnaby and his sidekick.
Well, I also kind of wondered watching this again, and I was like, is this a spinoff? Like, it felt to me like they were in some ways trying to set up a Danish spinoff. I mean, because that's what it sort of had that feeling of an episode here in the US when it's like CSI goes to New York and they meet a couple of CSI New York guys who then, next season they're in CSI New York.
Yeah.
That's what I was like kind of wondering. And then I did the research and I still kind of think that maybe there was an idea, like if this is a real big hit, if like this episode gets a lot of buzz, we can do a Danish spinoff.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that they kind of were doing the pairing so they could have, that kind of comedic moment of like, oh, they're Scandinavian, so they're also good looking. And so Sarah, who's pregnant, is going to be, okay. So did Nelson and Dane, do you think they hooked up?
I don't know if they hooked up in Denmark. I think there's a possibility, but I think they definitely do when she comes to Midsomer to give evidence.
Which we never see.
Yeah, we don't see that, but he's going to find himself a nice apartment. It's going to be spotless, and he's going to have her over. Yep. And they're going to do...
I mean, we do see Paulson again. Paulson does come back in a later episode. She guest stars, which I always thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I also did kind of love that one line because I think again, like I was expecting sort of a little fish out of water. That line at the beginning when they're on the phone with the Danish detectives, and then Barnaby hangs up and like, did he sound distracted? All Englishmen sound distracted.
Yeah, very much so.
So let's meet our village stars for this week.
Okay. And again, my apologies for mispronouncing and butchering a lot of this stuff, but playing Danish detective VPK Birgitte Poulsen is Anna Eleonora Jorgensen. She is a well-known actress in Denmark who has been in a number of theater productions there and is a member of the touring company Det Danske Teater. She appeared in the film Italian for Beginners, the Netflix series Elves, and the Danish show Herrens Veje, or Ride Upon the Storm. But she is probably best known for appearing in the series Forbrydelsen, known in the US and later remade here as The Killing. In that series, she plays the mother of a murdered girl. We also have PKA Anna Dane, and she is played by Birgitte Hjort Sorensen. She knew she wanted to be an actress when she saw a West End production of Chicago, and her first big break was playing Roxy Hart in a Danish production of Chicago that was highly acclaimed. Since then, she's appeared in Pitch Perfect 2, Vinyl, Grey Zone, and Game of Thrones, where she played a wildling chieftain in the classic Hardhome episode, which is a really great episode. She is probably best known for her role as journalist Katrine Fonsmark in the Danish political drama Borgen.
I think they're both very great in sort of like these kind of guest star roles. They're playing sort of the counterpart. Like, it's, Jorgensen has to be sort of the match for Barnaby.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be up on the same levels. But for Sorensen, she has to be on the same level as Nelson, which is sort of like, I guess I'm second banana.
Yeah. They're both hot people, okay? They look good together.
Borgen is a show that I'd heard about for a long time, and there was a period where it was not streaming anywhere. I think it was on PBS, and I had to have a special membership to PBS.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually found the DVDs at my library and watched all 3 seasons of it. It's a fantastic show. If you've never seen it, it is sort of the darker Danish version of The West Wing for American audiences, because it is all about the first female prime minister. And I just learned this. I guess they've rebooted it.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, there's a new season. I just discovered it today on Netflix. That looks like it's several of the main characters who have now what's going on in politics today. And Sorensen does make an appearance in the trailer. So I have not seen the show yet, but that's something I'm going to be looking forward to. I think they did some fantastic turns in this.
Yeah. Next we have Sanjeev Bhaskar, who played Armand Stone. He's best known for his work on the comedy The Kumars at Number 42 and the drama Unforgotten. He's had a long career working in everything from Notting Hill to Yesterday, and in 2006 he received an OBE. In 2015, he did both Drunk History and Horrible Histories for an amazing twofer. He also voiced Shankar on Thomas and Friends. He's next appearing in the Netflix adaptation of Neil Gaiman's classic graphic novel series, The Sandman, where he will be playing Cain.
Jonathan Barnwell played Harry Calder. Prior to this role, he was probably best known for playing PC Dick Hobbs on a couple seasons of Ripper Street. Since then, he's appeared in the film Lords of Chaos about black metal bands, and he plays the character Jorn Necrobutcher Stuberud. You can currently see him on the HBO/BBC series Industry, with a second season is apparently dropping sometime in 2022.
Cool. Poppy Drayton plays Summer Halston. Before this, she had small roles on Father Brown and Downton Abbey, but clearly Midsomer launched her onto bigger things, as since then she's had featured roles on the Shannara Chronicles and the reboot of the show Charmed, which I did not know existed, actually.
Yep, and it just ended, so you don't need to know about it. Sorry, Charmed fans. Joanna Scanlon plays Clara Trout, and she's had a lengthy career on both the big and small screen. She starred in several series, including Getting On, Puppy Love, Big School, and The Thick of It. She's appeared in films like The Other Boleyn Girl, Notes on a Scandal, Stardust, and Bridget Jones' Baby. Currently, she stars in looks like a charming family drama called The Larkins, and a forthcoming darker drama called Why Golau.
Next we have Maria Askahavi, who played Ingrid Madsen. She's a Danish actress who appeared in The Killing, Borgen, Versailles, and the films The Christmas Family and The Christmas Family 2 in the Land of the Aliens.
Nikolaj Copernicus plays Thomas Madsen. Now, he also appeared in The Killing, so are you sensing a theme yet with this episode? He also appeared in the film The Bench. After this episode of Midsomer, he seems to have stopped acting and switched more to directing. He did a few episodes of TV shows, and in the last year or two, he did a short film called Stenophonen.
He also, didn't he propose the sun-centric solar system? Eric's giving me a look.
Yes, okay. Looks are good for podcasts.
Now we have some returning visitors, let's move on with it.
A lot of return visitors.
Yeah. First we have Caroline Goodall, who plays Penelope Calder. She's had a long career on both sides of the Atlantic. She appeared in the miniseries The White Queen and its sequel, The White Princess, as well as The Good Wife, A Difficult Woman, The Princess Diaries 1 and 2, CSI, Alias, The Crown, Berlin Station, and as Peter Pan's wife in Hook, and as Emily Schindler in Schindler's List. In the episode Dead Letters, the special 10th anniversary episode, she played the character Grace Starkey.
Adrian Lucas plays Julian Calder in this episode. And again, another career actor with a lengthy resume. He's appeared in The Bill, Doc Martin, Red Dwarf, Black Mirror, recently in the film Judy with Renee Zellweger, and the TV show Spy City. Now, in the episode Dead in the Water, he played Philip Trent.
Richard Cordray played Atticus Bradley. He had a lengthy stage career doing a number of Shakespeare productions in the UK. He also appeared in Judy, as well as The Wife, About Time, Rumple of the Bailey, and Doc Martin. He played Dr. John Cole in the episode The Straw Woman, one of my favorites, and Morris Bingham in The Made-to-Measure Murders.
And finally, Nicholas Jones played Ernest Bradley. Now, he also appears in The Made-to-Measure Murders as Reverend Archie Morland, where his character also gets murdered. Hey, that's 2 for 2, Nicholas. He's another British actor with a lot of credits on stage and screen, but I think the coolest bit of trivia is he's also the brother of actress Gemma Jones, who appeared in the Midsomer Murders episode Ring Out Your Dead as the killer of bell ringers, Maisie Gooch, which means you were murdered twice, Nick, and your sister was a murderer, so she's one up on you. Because this is like the 16th season. We're at that point where a lot of actors are starting to get recycled because
there are only 100 working actors in Britain.
and a lot of them are like out in the Hollywood trying to get jobs.
Yeah.
So
yeah, sometime we're going to have to do 2 degrees of Midsomer because I think you could attach anyone to Midsomer in 2 moves.
yeah. All right. And now we're going to take you down a trip down the history of Nordic Noir on Eileen's History Corner.
All right. And once again, I apologize for not only butchering Danish names, but also some Swedes and some Norwegians, and maybe an Icelander in here. Okay, so Nordic Noir is also known as Scandinavian Noir and Scandinoir, and it combines traditional crime tropes with social commentary. In contrast to the typical English mystery as typified by Agatha Christie's country house and upper crust London society, it drew more from American hard-boiled mysteries, especially the works of Evan Hunter, author of The Blackboard Jungle and the 87th Precinct series under the pen name Ed McBain. This police procedural series influenced the Swedish Martin Beck series by Maj Sjöwall and Per Wahlöö. They published 10 books in the series, starting with Rosanna, from 1965 to 1975. The Laughing Policeman won the Mystery Writers of America's Edgar Award in 1971. They established a distinctive stripped-down and realistic style, and their novels were notable for including criticism of Swedish society in their mysteries. In 1991, Henning Mankell published the first Kurt Wallander novel, Faceless Killers, drawing from the tradition that Sjöwall and Wahlöö started. In 1997, the first English translation was published. He continued to publish books in this internationally acclaimed series until 2009, and published a novel with Wallander's novel Linda as the detective in 2005. It had been planned to be the first of a trilogy, but Mankell abandoned the idea when the actress playing Linda in the series, Johanna Sahlström, committed suicide, unfortunately. Miss Smilla's Feeling for Snow by Peter Hoeg, published in the U.S. under the much better title of Smilla's Sense of Snow, was published in Denmark in 1992. It was a huge, huge international bestseller and won the Crime Writers Association Silver Dagger Award for Fiction in 1994, and was shortlisted for the Edgar Award that same year. It brought Nordic Noir to a huge international audience. However, it wasn't until the 2000s that Nordic Noir really became huge as a genre. It wasn't even called Nordic Noir or Scandinavian Noir until the 2010s. In 2005, a journalist named Stieg Larsson published a book called Men Who Hate Women. When it was translated into English, it was published in 2008 under the title The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And suddenly, Scandinoir was a thing. Sadly, Larsson had died of a heart attack in 2004 before the first novel was published. He left 2 more in the series to be published, and possibly more that are being held up in litigation, and the series was continued for another 3 books by David Lagerkrantz. Soon after Men Who Hate Women was published in Sweden, the Danish TV series The Killing went into production, starring Sophie Grebel as Inspector Sarah Lund, and featuring Anna Eleonora Jorgensen, Nikolaj Copernicus, and Marie Askehave. It premiered in 2007 in Denmark and 2011 in the UK. That same year, an American adaptation was made and aired on AMC. The Danish version finally made its American debut in 2021. The political drama Borgen premiered in 2010 and featured Birgitte Hjort Sorensen as a TV journalist. The Bridge, featuring Nikolaj Copernicus, premiered the following year and continued in the Nordic Noir tradition. Other writers in the Nordic tradition include Norway's Jos Nesbø and his Harry Hola series, Camilla Lackberg from Sweden, and Iceland's Arnaldur Indriðason. Dane Jussi Adler Olsen has garnered acclaim for his Department Q series, especially The Keeper of Lost Causes, which was published in 2011. By 2013, when The Killings in Copenhagen was filmed, Nordic Noir had reached its zenith, with almost every Scandinavian with a word processor getting a publishing deal. There had been successful adaptations of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in both Sweden and the US, and the UK Wallander series starring Kenneth Branagh was airing. The Killings of Copenhagen combines the traditional small village whodunit with the Nordic Noir tradition, as we've stated earlier, using traditional British murder weapons such as poison, with a commentary on predatory capitalism and misogyny. Both Nordic Noir and the English cozy contrast the surface blandness of their settings with violence and murder.
In full disclosure, both Eileen and myself work for a publisher that has dealt a lot with some of these Scandinavian noir books in the past. And they've always been, there really was a period where these were sort of the hottest books that everyone was reading, especially the Stieg Larssons. Those really, mostly the character, I think, of Liz Salander really captured a zeitgeist moment.
For several years, seemed like all I was doing was selling that book and the sequels and making sure people had it the stock, checking. It was a real moment in publishing with that. And everywhere you look, people were saying, this is the next Stieg Larsson. This is the next girl with the dragon tattoo. There weren't any more that were quite that big, but it did start a more international look at publishing that I think hadn't been around for a while.
Yeah, and I think really the decline of Nordic Noir was probably around the release of the adaptation of Joe Nesbo's The Snowman, because that was so terrible.
I liked it.
Oh, that movie's... The
movie was bad. The movie was bad.
The movie's terrible. The book is fine. The movie is terrible.
Yeah.
The only thing that's memorable about it was the wonderful poster was like, "Hey, Mr. Policeman, I gave you all the clues," which is still a joke nowadays.
Yeah, and I love Michael Fassbender, and I thought he would be perfect at it. And I think if the movie had been done better, he would have been, but it was not. No.
So let's look at a strange kill in this episode. It's not so much a strange kill. It's actually a very brutal kill when we find out that Julian Calder was basically tied down and choked to death on alcohol. Mm-hmm. But I was just like, when that bit where we see him shrink wrapped to the pallet. Mm-hmm. How did they do that? Because look, I've seen factories where they do the shrink wrapping, and it's not like it's a machine. There's there's guys walking around with these giant things that are just like, and there had to have been sort of a Keystone Cop sort of pratfall moment where you're like holding the body and trying to wrap it around.
And the thing is, when we learned that it's just one person, and one person who does not seem like a physical, imposing person, and yet she manages to prop up this body against the pallet, the boxes in the pallet, and shrink wrap the whole thing by herself. And also, in the second half, when the two brothers are killed, she stages the whole thing. It's very...
The murder, some of these murders are downright brutal.
Yeah.
There's no, I don't quite understand why, I guess maybe to cause confusion, but there was really no reason to put the body in the boxes and all the shrink wrap. Yeah. And at the end, they're like, I was so tired by that one. It took a lot out of me. I said, well, yeah, he's 200 pounds and you're holding him up against boxes and shrink wrapping him.
Yeah.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah. But
you did get that wonderful moment in the factory where the body has been cut out and you just have that weird sort of cut out, the silhouette of the plastic on the boxes.
It's like those paper dolls that they send around, the teachers send around to places all over the world, and it's where's Charlie, where's Harold, whatever they're calling it,
I was thinking in the grand tradition of Looney Tunes when someone runs through a wall and they have that perfect outline.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of time in this cookie factory. I just want to know, did that seem like a weird factory to you?
It was very odd. It was very old-fashioned, which I can see in a way because it is a 100-year-old company, but it doesn't look like they've updated it much.
I know it seemed it seems straight out of Chaplin's Modern Times.
Yeah.
With these conveyor belts and everything like that. But it's just like when we've seen other Midsomer factories, like the pickle factory, right? Mm-hmm. And that's all very forklifts and automated and everything like that. And this seemed quaint for a world famous, apparently, trophy winning let's just for a second. There were a lot of trophies there, and I just want to know why. What baking competitions allow a cookie company? It was like, well, we beat out Nabisco, and
They could have been out Nabisco. They kind of took all the flavor out of all their cookies.
yeah.
Anyway, it is not exactly Willy Wonka's factory.
No.
However, Armand does dress like Willy Wonka.
Armand is a very strange character, especially, just the egotisticalness of him. It's like, you make freaking cookies.
Yeah.
You make cookies, man.
Do that.
No. Oh, and did you notice that his test kitchen had like Bunsen burners and beakers and test tubes?
I don't think that would have passed inspection in any modern country.
I looked at that and I'm like, I don't think that's what test kitchens. I don't think that's like what they actually use for test kitchens.
Yeah.
And I'm like, am I crazy? So I looked it up and I'm like, no, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
They look like kitchens. They don't look like labs.
Yeah, I have been to America's Test Kitchen, and it looked more like the Danish police station.
Yeah. They're just like, did you synthesize strychnine with your lab equipment? It's like, no. And like, well, then why the hell do you have all this? Like,
Yeah.
what is this for? All right. The way to make a chocolate chip cookie is I use 2 test tubes of flour and 1 beaker of chips. And for a cookie that they mention a lot, golden clusters, we don't ever actually see a golden cluster, do we?
I don't know. Is that what Sarah was eating? Were those the golden clusters?
It's not like we got a close-up, so I don't...
No.
So who knows? Like, I don't know what a golden cluster... Like, at the end of the day, I don't know what a golden cluster is or why everyone is so excited about it.
Yeah.
I also think it's hilarious that at the ending of it turns on the finding of this recipe for golden clusters. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not how they make cookies in a factory.
No.
Is with, like, these measurements.
Yeah.
There's not, like if there was, you would have seen a whole room of, like, people going, teaspoon, teaspoon, teaspoon.
I just want to know if they also make ice sombreros in that factory.
Does anyone make ice sombreros? I still keep like I've never seen an ice sombrero anywhere except for that episode of Midsomer.
But it was so great.
That we know of. So we're going to take a break here, and then we're going to come back shortly with the second half of the Killings of Copenhagen. And we're back. Let's look at the second half of this episode.
It's great to be here. I love your country. It's very beautiful.
Oh, so you've been to Denmark before?
No.
Then how do you know it's beautiful?
What I've seen of it so far, I mean, the journey from the airport, the motorways, it's very clean, it's very flat. You done? Yes, thank you.
John and Nelson head to Denmark to continue their investigation. Of course, that means John could end up missing the birth. No, John, it's a TV show. The birth will happen while you're solving the murder, adding extra pressure. Or maybe in an elevator during a blackout. Anyways, they get to Denmark and meet Paulson and Den, who inform them that because technically Julian was killed in Midsomer, the murder is not theirs. At the factory, the owner of Toff's tells the detectives that Calder wasn't just making a deal to sell them cookies. They were buying the whole damn cookie factory. Calder was getting out, but why? Coroner Kate searches Julian's office for Barnaby and finds a letter from a property company in Copenhagen. Barnaby and Paulson visit the company and find out Calder had bought a cabin for a woman named Ingrid Madsen. Madsen has a brother named Thomas, whose credit card was used to buy that Danish card and flower set at the funeral. The detectives visit the brother, who tells them he didn't know Eric and doesn't know where Ingrid is. When they leave, he opens up a closet to reveal Ingrid, and he's not happy. Meanwhile, back in Midsomer, Trout sees Armand and the brothers arguing. She tries to ask what's going on, but Armand is pretty testy. Oh, and we find out that Kate can read IKEA directions better than the detectives and puts together Sarah's crib. Downstairs, though, Nelson and Den hang out at the Love Cottage and surprise brother Thomas, who is trying to cover up his sister living there. The whole thing comes out. Ingrid and Eric met in 1989, falling in love and having an affair. But because he was married, they agreed it was just a one-off. However, Ingrid had a child that Eric never knew about and that Thomas forced her to give up for adoption because he's a big old jerk. Recently, Eric had rekindled things with Ingrid, and they had used the cottage for their assignations, even planning to leave his wife for her. Thomas went to the hotel to try and tell Eric to stay away, but he was already dead. The detectives figure out that the love child is Summer, the hostess. They say their goodbyes and hurry back to Midsomer, just in time for the Bradley brothers to be murdered at their dinner table and staged to look like dead pigs with apples in their mouths. They learn the brothers were shipping things to Calder's cabin, but never actually sent the boxes. Among them, they find a recipe book containing what looks like Calder cookie recipes. However, it's not in the Calder's handwriting, and it's missing the golden clusters recipe. It's also from before Armand's time at the company, which means he's not the baking genius he claims. Summer tells the detectives that she had come to Midsomer to find her father, but was too scared to tell him. However, she does tell Harry, and that really screws him up. Penelope tells them she knew about the earlier affair, but wasn't aware that he was leaving her. Barnaby finds an old newspaper photo of the Calder staff and somehow sees the recipe book in the coat pocket of Trout's mother. It was her recipes! Meanwhile, Trout knocks out Armand and puts them on the conveyor belt to the oven. Barnaby and Nelson show up at the factory just in time for Sarah to call and say the baby is coming. Ugh, didn't see that happening. In classic Barnaby form, John decides to capture the killer first. And here's the reveal. Trout's mom invented the recipe for golden clusters and sold the recipe to the Calders in exchange for the money for the tea room. However, after her mom's passing, Trout discovered what her mom had done and was angry, feeling they had stolen all the praise her mother deserved. So she killed the brothers before they could sell the company, and the Bradleys because they tried to sell the recipes. Now Stone must die for his lying. The detectives managed to save Stone, who tells Trout one more thing. Trout's mom had a condition in the deal that her daughter would be permanently employed at the company, showing that her mother believed Clara was her real legacy, not golden clusters. John rushes to the hospital while we see Summer calling Harry, pleading for his forgiveness. Harry just hangs up on her to his mother's approval as he stands at a large window and I guess accepting his fate as a cookie man? Summer is in tears and is probably out of a job when a customer comes through the door of the tea room. It's Ingrid. They reconnect as we see John and Sarah hold their baby girl in the hospital. They name the girl Betty.
Aww.
All right, so the killer is revealed to be Clara Trout. And I have to say, this is another clear Midsomer case of a person who in real life would have very clear, obvious issues that would be like just walking around all the time. You'd be like, if you saw this person walking around, like, stay away from them. There's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
But in the Midsomer world and in like detective fiction at large, it's like a thing that can be turned off and on like a faucet.
Yeah. It's funny because as you see through most of it until the very end, obviously, she's kind of overplays her geniality and her admiration for Armand and the Calder family.
Yeah, I mean, like the most we see her emotional is when she deals with Summer. And a lot of that is Summer really is a terrible, terrible employee. For, maybe at a tea room or any kind of eating establishment, just awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Not knowing the difference between sour cream and mayonnaise. And why are you having a mayonnaise sandwich anyway? Just mayonnaise on a sandwich.
I also think it's a little weird is that, so they bought the recipe from her mom, and then I guess they felt that the company needed the face of someone to be like the genius behind it. It was just I mean, here's the thing. If Nabisco comes out with a new cookie, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear reports about the baking genius at the Nabisco test kitchen that came up with this cookie. So I don't know what the logic of that was. And secondly, it's like this is what people do. Like they buy a recipe. It's not like they ripped her off or anything like that. They just bought a recipe and then used it.
Yeah. And as an employee, you don't technically own what you produce for the company.
Yeah,
it's part
it's
of
work for hire.
Yeah, it is what you do as your job. The fact that she managed to get a sweet deal with enough money to have a tea room that's been running for quite some time and a permanent employment for her daughter is actually not a bad deal. Now, if she had been really smart, she would have maybe gone for a little bit of royalties on those cookies.
I mean, at the end of the day, too, I have to say, there's no way. Tofts was going to come in and just no, we're going to automate this. We're buying the name and all that stuff. You're out. So, that that would have been like an interesting motivation for murder.
Yeah.
That would be like, oh, like if they sell, then I'm out of it. They're going to, my livelihood is wiped out because like this tea room sucks. And I also feel like she probably would have killed Summer for like, you put whipped cream in the coffee. What the, I mean, she's violent too.
Yeah.
And at the end though, like I was shocked by Barnaby's compassion for this person who's stabbed two men in the heart, held a guy down and like strangled him on booze.
Yeah.
Like strychnine poisoning, as we saw, very violent death, and then was about to burn a man alive. And he's just like, hey, it's going to be okay. Your mom loved you.
Yeah. Not to mention the chance she took that nobody else would open that box for inspection and gets poisoned by the strychnine.
I just kind of felt like John should have been at some point going, yeah. We know you did it. I got to get to the hospital. Can we just, no, you're going to jail. You're going to jail.
Yeah.
What they were trying to do is by giving this killer the motivation is like the whole episode then becomes about, just like all the Fast and the Furious movies, it's about family.
Yes, it is. And a lot of Midsomer episodes do focus on the family. It's also the dynamic, the Gertrude, Claudius, Hamlet dynamic from that famous play by Shakespeare that's set in Denmark. Yeah, Othello. So, yeah, and we do see that kind of dynamic in a few other episodes as well.
And speaking about it being all in the family, so the shadow of incest once again rears its ugly head in Midsomer as Harry is super into his. Now, in fairness, he does not realize that it's his half sister.
Yeah,
but Summer knows, and I can't tell if they're trying to play her as just like she is so kind of dense that she can't understand like that, like this, like she is an attractive woman.
Yeah,
like I'm pretty sure like all guys like it's not like guys have a lot of creative moves when they come to like trying to hit on attractive girls. It's quite obvious that Harry's like, hey, I'm interested in you, and she's like, oh, we're friends.
Yeah. And I do understand her wanting to get to know him because they are half siblings.
Absolutely, but the thing is like it's very clear that Harry is giving off like all kinds of vibes, and but then like when he tries to kiss her, she's like, "What are you doing? Like I didn't know you were interested in me in that way." It's like, really?
Yeah, yeah, because it was kind of obvious that he was mooning over her.
Yeah. So they did a lot of actual detective work in this episode, lab reports and traveling across the country. But I think the most interesting detective work is this is our first episode with D.I. Charlie Nelson.
Yes.
Now, he is played by Welsh actor Guillaume Lee. At age 16, Lee performed with the Royal Shakespeare Company in a production of Richard III. He has actually done a number of Shakespeare productions, well acclaimed, including he played Laertes against Jude Law's Hamlet. Now, he joined Midsomer at the start of its 16th season and stayed through the 18th. So he was there for 3 seasons. He left the show for other opportunities, including a very big starring role in the Queen biopic Bohemian Rhapsody, where he played Brian May. And he also had a starring role in the first season of the show Jamestown. You can currently see Lee appearing in The Great on Hulu.
He is so funny in that show.
I have not watched it.
He plays Tsar Peter's best friend whose wife he's boinking. So he's kind of put in this really funny situation there. But
thank you for saying boinking so we don't have to bleep you.
And it brings us back to that first episode again.
There we go.
Where they were boinking in the woods.
Yep. What are your feelings about Nelson?
I found him to be kind of light and funny. He didn't try to be Jones. He had more of a different relationship with John Barnaby than Ben Jones had with him. and obviously with Tom Barnaby, it's more of a camaraderie rather than a mentor-mentee relationship. He's learning a lot, but it's even with his attire, it's much more casual in many ways.
Yeah, I've noticed that he is the I don't wear ties detective.
Yeah.
Which is funny is Barnaby's always in a tie, and you just feel like he should be put a tie on, man.
Yeah, because Tom would have made him wear a tie.
Tom would have made him wear a tie. Yeah. I like Lee as an actor, and I've liked him in other things. I always felt this character was slightly, I feel like they didn't quite know what to do with him. He's not quite the slapstick. He doesn't bring quite the humor that Jones did. And he's clearly meant to be very handsome.
Yes.
He's meant to be but he's not he's not played like Scott was.
Yeah.
I feel like he was just starting to get into his own as a character when he left the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we will have plenty more opportunities to talk about him as we keep going with this show. But the only time we're going to get a chance to talk about the Bradley brothers is right now. I kind of loved when we see them at the beginning, and they used there was a slight detail besides the fact that their place looked like garbage. But I loved the little detail of you see it how bad their finances are when he's going through the tea bags and he's like, how many times have we used this one? 3 times? Okay, I can get another one out of this. Yeah. Which I love that little detail. That was just in a show that's not known for its subtlety. That was such a beautiful, subtle detail.
Yeah.
That I really liked it.
I thought they were fun. I think they could have been a little bit more used in the show because in many ways, I think because they were focusing so much on the Danish part of it that the Midsomer felt a little underbaked in many ways.
Well, they keep coming back to these guys.
Yeah.
It's very clear they have something that they're very ooh, we're going to make money from this. But I did love the fact that when the one brother discovers the thing in the box, he literally looks at it for half a second and he goes, oh. Now, I don't know what he found. Even Tom, when you find the box, they have to open the box, go through the box, dig open the box, pull out paperwork and everything like that to before they figure out what they have. And he's just opens the lid. They should have just had light shooting out of it, like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction.
So now we know it was in the briefcase at Pulp Fiction. It was the golden clusters recipe.
I'm going to email Quentin Tarantino and find out if this is true. There was just the weirdness about these brothers was how they were sort of slid into things that that really made no sense. I get why they were at the funeral. I mean, it's an open funeral. How'd they get into the wake? Yeah. Was this an open door wake?
You show up at the funeral, you usually go to the wake. Or not. It's like anybody. It's a small village. We saw that in the first episode. Everybody shows up.
Yeah, well then where was all the other people from the village that we've met before?
They're all dead.
Who's been murdering people? And the other thing I kind of liked was so when the bodies are found, there's really no way you would know that the cases are connected other than the fact that they were at the funeral.
Yeah.
Which again, it's a small town. So I'm glad that they kind of did the searching around and found the notes, but at no point did any of the detectives oh, this is connected to the other murders.
Yeah.
It's these guys were stabbed. It was a completely different MO. There's no note or anything like that. It's just haha, detectives, I did it again.
Yeah.
It really should have been a little bit more of surprise that these were connected.
Yeah. And especially since Clara took the time to set the whole table for a full tea service, which was very Dennis Rainbird, I just want to say.
Yeah. This woman was not healthy, and it would have been quite apparent. I'm assuming at some point she would have turned to Summer and said, if you do not get this right, I'm going to murder you. And that is not a metaphor. Quick corner. Kate really didn't get a lot of cornering.
No, just a little bit at the end there. Because most of the bodies were in Denmark.
Yeah, but also the fact that you see her do more things of Like, first of all, she's a coroner and yet somehow is also doing crime scene lab work at the
house. Yeah,
or at the factory.
Yeah,
she's at the factory, like that's not like she's a coroner. That's not her job.
Yeah, it's like, what, did they fire the all the support staff at the police station?
And then he's like, hey, would you go and search a desk for me?
Yeah. Oh, maybe you should have called the guy who, was the fastest driver in the county.
I want to talk on that in just a second, but I also want to point out that she also assembles the crib.
Yeah.
Which, great. She did it better than the guys. Why didn't they assemble the crib in the actual room where they were going to use it? Because
it's harder to carry it. Yeah, that's
up that stairway. You saw that stairway.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. But I love that he just handed her the Allen wrench.
Yep. But that does bring us to the home life and getting to see a little bit more. I mean, this is obviously a very pivotal episode for the Barnabys. This is our second time with Fiona Dolman, so I wanted to stop for a moment and talk a little bit about her. She was born in Findhorn, Moray, Scotland. Her very first on-screen role was as the character Julie Mugford in an episode of Crime Story. She went on to appear in the popular miniseries Ultraviolet. She was on 4 years worth of this popular drama called Heartbeats. She first appeared in Midsomer in an uncredited role in the 1998 episode Death of a Hollow Man, where she's just like a real estate agent in the background. Mm-hmm. But in 2011, she was cast as Sarah Barnaby, the wife of Detective John Barnaby. She was a big fan of the show, and she actually begged the casting director for a chance at this. And she seemed like she was a pretty early contender. She had great chemistry with Neil Dudgeon. Now, one of the reasons she looks sweaty and tired in the pregnancy, the giving birth scene, was she hit just a week out from having a baby.
Yeah. Yeah, this was not too long after she did. And I can imagine her saying, I do not want the typical Hollywood glammed up, I just had a baby scene. She looked happy and radiant, but also really sweaty and really tired. Which I think she drew a lot from her own experience of having a baby. And I love that they portrayed it that way.
Yeah. There was a lot of comedy, I thought, around sort of obviously this was they're trying to use create the comedy tension, like the anxiety is like, oh, will I be there in time? The bit of the spider in the bath scene where,
yeah,
which I kind of loved because that was a whole situation that could have been simply, it's like, she's like, John. And he literally could have answered the whole thing, which is like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe she just couldn't find her shoe.
Yeah, but all of it, and just the fact that all of this is going on, and it's a TV show. Everyone watching this episode knows exactly, when that baby's coming.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And John has to make the choice, and he does what a Barnaby always does: goes for the killer first.
Yep. But you did want that high pursuit driver to actually do the driving to the missed opportunity there. Yeah,
I thought that would have been hilarious, especially because I'm wondering if that was when you see John getting into the car at the factory and he's like, drive me to the hospital, and I'm like, oh, is this the high pursuit guy? Yeah. Are we just going to see him doing 80, whipping around the road?
He just knocks over everybody on his way into the hospital. I mean, he gets really aggressive. That couple, he just splits them apart. He's instead of going around them. You kind of wanted the Benny Hill theme song in that.
Yeah. They named the baby Betty.
Yeah. They named her after longtime producer Betty Willingate, as we discussed in the first episode of our podcast. She was very instrumental in bringing the series to TV. Yep. She was a big fan of the books and was the driving force behind the production of it. And this was very definitely an homage to her.
I think it was a very sweet, the scenes where they were after the baby, I thought were very sweet, except when she says that that Betty has John's nose and mouth. And I'm like, oh boy, that's not.
Yeah. I will say the first time I saw that episode when it first aired, I thought that baby has a lot of hair, but I've recently had a grandniece and that little baby Jojo has even more hair than baby Betty does.
Let's wrap it up. Final thoughts on the Killings of Copenhagen.
I liked the Danish part of it. I liked that there were a lot of parallels that were going on. The two detectives, and contrast, the two detectives in Denmark that were female contrasted with the two male detectives from the UK. The two sets of brothers, all the victims were both sets of brothers, which was interesting. One very wealthy, one so poor they were, getting, 4 uses out of a tea bag. So I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff they did along that line. I don't know if it's an outstanding episode. I think it's fun. There's some weird stuff to it, but I think Armand is a bit odd. I think they could have, because the actor is well known for his comedic performances, and I think they could have made him a little more Dennis Rainbird-y. Though maybe they didn't want to go to that well too many times. I mean, you can only have one Dennis Rainbird in Badger's Drift, but I like it. I think it's a decent episode.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Watching it the second and third time, it's a fun mystery. Midsomer has that. It always has to try to balance like what level weird. Like, is it not weird enough, or is it too weird? And this, I think, finds the appropriate tone. There's just enough weirdness to it. There's just enough suspense. They find the right balance, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's they managed even with the baby element, like having the baby storyline, the comedy of that I thought was it's predictable but well played.
Yeah.
And I think this is like one of my more favorite outings with Neil Dudgeon. And yeah, I really enjoyed it a lot.
All right, excellent.
So that's everything that we wanted to talk about. We want to thank everyone for listening to us. If you had anything you want to discuss about the Killings of Copenhagen or Midsomer murders in general, feel free to email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. We are also Welcome to Midsomer on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing to us. That's the little plus button on your iTunes, or rating and review us on iTunes or any other podcast app. It really helps people find us. Tell your friends about us. Tell your friends about Midsomer Murders and get them hooked on that, and then get them hooked on this show. We're going to be back next month, and we hope you will join us again. And as we take the road out of Midsomer, we want to thank you for listening and remind you that in Badger's Drift, making cookies can be murder.
And usually is.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act Fair Use Exception for criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art was designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space.